Hello, we're going to go through some Romeo and Juliet quotations. Have your pens ready and hope this is helpful. Right, first quotation, my only love sprung from my only hate. This is in Act 1, Scene 5. Shakespeare uses antithesis and oxymoron, only love, only hate, to dramatise Juliet's internal conflict and paradox of loving someone she's socially obliged to hate because of this feud. The tension captures the broader theme of love versus duty. My grade 9 insight is that Juliet's realization elevates love beyond personal emotion. It's politically and socially transgressive. Her words anticipate tragedy, and remember, we realize it's a tragedy all the way through because of the prologue, and highlighting how individual desire cannot escape structural, familial, and societal bounds. Okay? It's a really sad moment after she's met Romeo, and she gets this wonderfully painful realization after the nurse tells her, he's your only enemy, the son of your only enemy. And we get this understanding of Juliet, this 13-year-old, not yet 14-year-old girl, having to have an enemy purely because of a familial feud that she definitely is not really invested in or has anything to do. With love's light wings did I overpatch these walls. The metaphor of love's light wings elevates Romeo's emotion into something transcendental, defying physical and social barriers. It's this whole idea that he is willing to go beyond and away from the kind of bounds of societal expectations, right? And it's also signifying the growth and sincerity of his love. I would say that we begin to see him move away from the Petrarchan lover, who's just like fascinated with this idea of love, and into this more kind of intense, visceral view of love that kind of really, is emblematic of him and Juliet's relationship. Grade 9 inset. Romanticism verges on hubris. His belief that love conquers all foreshadows the danger of his idealism. The juxtaposition of love with looming violence, Tybalt's threats, the secret setting, creates a structural irony. As we know, this love cannot survive, and there's something really sad about that, actually. A Plague on Both Your Houses, Mercutio, Act 3, Scene 1. Act 3, Scene 1 is probably, I'm going to tell you, my favourite scene in the entire play, just because it really moves it from what's actually becoming a bit of a light-hearted comedy with, a happy-go-lucky nurse with innuendos and malapropisms, and actually a really dark, tragic moment where we see the moment of peripeteia. Mercutio's curse, uttered with dying breath, becomes a powerful condemnation of the feud. His use of plague evokes disease imagery, implying the feud is infectious and destructive to all, not just Montagues and so forth, and Capitalists. Because remember, Mercutio is not Montague. This is a big, big thing for you to remember. He is a friend of Romeo's. He also seems to be a friend of the prince, but even though he is not directly involved in this familial feud, his life is taken as a result of it. Right, I'm going to say Shakespeare used Mercutio, character often associated with comedy, as a mouthpiece for the truth. The tonal shift from wit to bitterness mirrors the play's descent from romantic comedy to tragic inevitably, suggesting the conflict arose not only lives but joy and civility. I'm also going to say this, the fact that he uses the word plague, which is really fascinating because you have to remember that Shakespeare's audience would have been aware of plagues at that time. So there is something quite evocative there, and I think quite provocative as well by Shakespeare, using an image that his audience would have been aware of and feared, to kind of really heighten this moment and to show the severity of this turning point. These violent delights have violent ends, violence, foreshadowing. Paradox encapsulate the play's tragic arc. The repetition of violent reinforces that even beauty and love are corrupted in a world governed by intensity and impulse. Friar's comment is both prophetic and ironic. He warns them, yet he facilitates their marriage. Remember, we've discussed the fact that the friar is quite a character that is filled with hypocrisy, possibly due to the kind of anti-Catholic sentiment at the time, and Shakespeare trying to appease Elizabeth I. We've talked about Shakespeare critiques religious and patriarchal authority figures whose passive complicity allows youthful recklessness to lead to catastrophe. So we have these figures who should, because of the amount of power they have in society or the amount of influence they have, but instead of using their influence for good, they are complicit and they allow it to continuously happen. And that in many ways aids the kind of youthful recklessness that causes the painful deaths at the end of the play. pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives. Now, this is a quote that you lot have been really kind of speaking to me about, and I'm so incredibly happy, because if you're speaking about it, it shows me how much you can be able to discuss like this really important moment, because this links beautifully to fate, which is one of the key themes of the play, isn't it? The prologue sonnet, and remember it's in sonnet form to represent love, okay, lends the play a sense of classical inevitability. Star-crossed suggest astrology and fate govern human lives. So Romeo and Juliet's love is doomed from the outset. The structure creates dramatic irony throughout. The audience watches the lovers' choices unfold, and it really heightens the tension of the play. There's so many times we're like, oh my goodness, Romeo, you're going to die. And then it happens, okay? And it's all the way through. And continue reading that section, please, and I hope that's helpful. Still on fate. Then I defy you, stars. Here's Romeo directly discussing and directing himself onto the stars, okay? The apostrophe, direct address of the stars, creates emotional intensity and shows his desperation. However, we know in this play that fate overpowers all of human desires. So there's some sort of irony there, because the defiance is what seals his fate. Structural irony to explore tragic blindness. Romeo's belief in autonomy drives him to fatal decisions, and his downfalls becomes a commentary on youthful arrogance and the illusion of control as well. You cannot defy the stars, you know? And later we can talk about the fact that previously he talks about, oh, I'm fortune's fool. As you know, that's one of my favourite quotations. Juliet, it is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden. Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2. Her tricolon, remember there's a 3 there, shows initial hesitation, yet her continuing with the relationship shows how passion overrides rationality, okay? She, I think, in many ways has much more foresight than Romeo, even though she's younger than him. And I think that's part of the kind of exceptional nature of Juliet. You know, the idea of a tragic hero or heroine, they have to have an exceptional quality. And goodness me, is Juliet exceptional? You know, she's so brave, she has so much courage, but she also has such wisdom and foresight throughout the text. You can talk about the fact that Shakespeare presents Juliet as self-aware, yet ultimately swept away by emotion. Her use of rhetorical structure, kind of that too rash, not a rhetorical question, a rhetorical structure, the tricolon, kind of mimics adult reasoning, which contrasts with the impulsivity of her actions, revealing a tragic blend of maturity, she has got immense maturity, but she's still only 13, and naivety. Right, hope that was all helpful to you, and best of luck.